There's a moment in every person's life when the silence becomes louder than the chaos, when the noise of ambition, the hustle, the constant self-improvement all collapse into one aching question. Why does it always feel like I'm beginning again? From nothing. You start a new habit, a new chapter, a new life. And for a few days, it feels powerful. But then, it fades. You slip. You relapse. You spiral. And the weight of that quiet failure suffocates something deeper than just your motivation. It suffocates your trust in yourself. Carl Jung understood this pattern better than most. Because what keeps you stuck is never just laziness or weakness. It's that invisible wound you keep trying to outrun by building 1,000 new versions of yourself. You call it reinventing. But the truth is, you're just replacing one illusion with another. And the cycle begins again. The hidden reason you're always starting over. Jung believed that the psyche isn't interested in perfection. It's interested in wholeness. That means every time you run from the past, from your shadow, from the parts of yourself you don't want to face, you're not evolving. You're fragmenting. Every fresh start that ignores your old wounds is just another version of self-abandonment dressed as growth. That's why it doesn't last. You're not starting over because you're broken. You're starting over because you've been trying to heal through becoming someone else, rather than becoming more of yourself. And the deeper tragedy, you've mastered the art of survival without ever feeling safe in your own presence. So you keep running. But no matter where you run, you always end up back here, with yourself. The emotional exhaustion behind your failures. It's easy to blame discipline, to say, I just need to focus more. I need to want it more. But the reason you fall off the path isn't because your will is weak. It's because the reason behind your journey was never emotionally true. Jung said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." And if what you do is constantly build from avoidance, shame, or guilt, then what you become is not stronger, just more exhausted. You weren't lazy. You were emotionally starved. You didn't lack commitment. You lacked clarity about why you were moving. You thought the change would erase the pain. But the pain wasn't meant to be erased. It was meant to be listened to. Because pain doesn't block the path. It is the path. You don't need another reset. You need a reunion. The real reason you're tired of starting over? It's not because life keeps getting harder. It's because each new beginning costs you more of yourself, more trust, more hope, more energy. And what you truly need right now isn't another starting Monday plan. You need to stop abandoning the version of you that keeps crawling back, no matter how broken they feel. That part of you that tries again, even after you gave up on them. That's not weakness. That's not failure. That's resilience, begging for reunion. Jung taught that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. And every time you say, I don't know why I keep doing this, that's your unconscious raising its voice. It's asking you to stop pretending that discipline is enough. It's not. Integration is. The lie of motivation and the truth beneath it. You've been taught to wait for motivation, like it's some divine spark. But motivation is unreliable because it was never meant to carry you. It's a signal, a spark, a whisper of energy. But if you build your life around it, it will betray you the moment things get hard. And they will get hard. Because real transformation doesn't happen in excitement. It happens in boredom, in grief, in stillness. Jung wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. So you scroll, you overcommit, you overthink, you make another list, you build another routine. But beneath all of that is the one truth you've been trying to avoid. You don't need a new life. You need a deeper one. The seduction of the clean slate." It feels good to reset, doesn't it? The notebooks, the goals, the perfectly arranged calendar. But that feeling, that excitement, is often the very thing keeping you trapped. Because starting over gives you a sense of control, but it robs you of momentum. You're not failing because you're stuck. You're failing because you keep interrupting your healing by demanding it look like productivity. Your healing might not be visible. It might not be glamorous, but it's happening, even when it feels like nothing is moving. The danger is in assuming that silence means failure. Sometimes silence is the soul finally resting. Sometimes the boredom is a sign you're no longer addicted to chaos. Sometimes the stillness means you're exactly where you need to be. Your future doesn't need another hero, just an honest witness. You want a breakthrough, but the real power isn't in changing your life. It's in witnessing it without flinching. Can you look at your patterns without punishing yourself? Can you see the cycle and stay grounded long enough to break it? Can you feel the urge to run and choose to stay? Jung didn't just ask us to change. He asked us to meet ourselves as we are, not as we wish to be. Because when you meet yourself in your lowest moment with compassion instead of criticism, that's not weakness. That's the beginning of real change. And it doesn't require a restart, just a reckoning. And right when you're about to give up, something strange happens. You pause, not because you have the answers, but because for the first time, you're not running. You're breathing. You're watching. You're listening. And in that quiet pause, something awakens. Not the old version of you who needed to fix everything, but the version who's finally ready to feel it all, to face the thing you thought would destroy you. But instead, it frees you. And that's where the shift begins. Not in the next chapter, but right here, in the stillness before the storm. You were never meant to keep reinventing yourself to be loved. But somewhere along the way, you began to believe that who you are isn't enough. So you crafted a better version. One who smiles even when tired. One who plans instead of feels. One who achieves but forgets to rest. And it worked for a while. You impressed them. You felt in control. You even believed the mask. Until the cracks started to show. Not outside, but inside. Because you can only pretend for so long before your soul starts to ache for its original shape. The version of you that existed before performance. The one that didn't need to start over. The one who just needed to be found. Why you keep falling backwards. It's not sabotage. It's not failure. It's your inner world rebelling against the pressure to be perfect. Jung warned, until you own your darkness, it will consume you in disguise. So it shows up as procrastination, as burnout, as self-doubt when things finally start going well. And then you label it as weakness, not realizing that it's a cry from the parts of you you've left behind. You don't fall backwards because you're weak. You fall backwards because there's still a piece of you trapped in the place you ran from. And until you turn around and face it, you'll keep circling the same path, calling it growth. Why trying harder isn't the answer. You've pushed yourself. You've read the books, watched the videos, made the plans. But effort without awareness becomes punishment. And you've punished yourself with goals that were never yours. You chase a version of success that doesn't soothe your soul. You keep proving your worth to people who don't even notice. You climb ladders, leaning against the wrong wall. Then wonder why the view feels empty. Because striving isn't always strength. Sometimes it's fear wearing armor. And when fear drives your actions, you don't grow, you harden. You become efficient, but numb, disciplined, but disconnected, visible, but invisible to yourself. And the more you achieve, the less you feel alive. That's not progress. That's forgetting. The root isn't in what you do. It's in what you avoid. Jung didn't teach people how to win more. He taught them how to feel more, to see the unseen, to speak the unspoken, to embrace what feels unbearable. Because what you avoid doesn't disappear. It waits, in your body, in your dreams, in your reactions. It waits for silence. It waits for heartbreak. It waits for the moment when everything collapses again. And then it whispers, "Can you see me now?" Not to punish you, but to free you. Because every emotional collapse is not the end of your progress. It's the return of your soul asking to be included. You're not lost. You're disconnected. There's a difference. Being lost means you have no direction. But being disconnected means you've been walking someone else's path. You feel tired, not because you're doing too much, but because none of it feels like you. And that exhaustion? It's sacred. It's your soul telling you, "I'm done performing. I'm ready to come home." But home isn't in a routine, or a morning ritual, or a new identity. Home is in the parts of you you've disowned, the anger you silenced, the grief you numbed, the joy you postponed, the softness you replaced with control. You don't need to become stronger. You need to become whole. The myth of clean beginnings. The world loves fresh starts. January 1st, Monday mornings, new planners, vision boards. But Jung would remind you, there is no such thing as a clean start without reconciliation. You can't bury the past and expect the roots not to rise again. You can't delete your patterns by erasing your timeline. Because healing isn't a reset. It's a return to your truth, a return to your needs, a return to the moments you didn't understand, but never forgot. And only when you return can you finally move forward, not by starting over, but by starting with everything you've been running from. That's the only kind of momentum that lasts. The discipline of staying. Staying sounds simple, but it's one of the hardest spiritual muscles to build. Staying in the discomfort. Staying in the routine after it stops being exciting. staying with yourself when you feel unworthy, staying with the plan even when the results aren't visible yet. Most people don't fail because they can't start. They fail because they never learn how to stay. But staying isn't about pushing harder. It's about learning how to soften into yourself. To stay doesn't mean to freeze. It means to root, to allow your actions to be slower, but more honest, to give yourself permission to grow beneath the surface, where no one can see. And that kind of staying, that's not discipline. That's devotion. You don't need more willpower. You need a witness. Most people think they need to man up, toughen up, get serious. But what they really need is someone, even if it's just themselves, to see the pain they carry, the weight they hide, the story they've never said out loud. Because what we name, we can finally tame. What we reveal, we can finally heal. And what we embrace no longer controls us. Carl Jung said that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But it's also the most liberating, because once you do, you no longer have to perform for your future. You simply become it. And just when you think it's too late, a subtle realization appears. The path was never supposed to be straight. You were never supposed to get it right the first time. Every false start, every relapse, every time you almost gave up, was not proof of failure. It was proof of return. Proof that something in you still believes, still breathes, still reaches for the light, even after darkness. You're not behind. You're becoming. And the beauty is, you haven't missed it. The door is still open. The story is still unfolding. But this time, you won't leave any part of you behind. Most people don't fail because they're weak. They fail because they're tired of pretending, tired of always being on, tired of smiling through the confusion, tired of trying to look healed when inside something still hurts. This is the silent burnout Jung spoke about, the kind that doesn't scream, but slowly drains your soul, the kind that makes success feel hollow, that turns your dreams into checklists, that replaces your fire with fatigue. But what if this tiredness isn't the end? What if it's the doorway? You're not lazy. You're starving. Starving for meaning. Starving for silence in a world that won't stop screaming. Starving for someone to say, you don't have to earn your place. You've spent so long chasing approval that you've forgotten how to hear your own voice. You think you lack motivation. But what you really lack is permission. Permission to pause. Permission to want something different. Permission to walk away from what looks good on the outside, but empties you on the inside. You're not failing. You're fasting from false versions of yourself. The inner split no one talks about. There's the version of you that others see. And then there's the one inside, watching silently. The one who remembers what you really wanted. The one who still cries in secret when old wounds reopen. The one who wonders if anyone truly knows them at all. You've kept them hidden for years, maybe even decades. But that split, the gap between your mask and your truth, is the real source of your exhaustion. Because it takes energy to be who you're not. It takes energy to rehearse every sentence, manage every impression, juggle every emotion to make others feel comfortable. No wonder you're tired. You're not starting over again because you're weak. You're starting over because that inner version of you is finally asking to lead. Your old life was built on avoidance. Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. You built a life based on what was safe, what was expected, what wouldn't disappoint your parents, or confuse your friends, or disrupt your comfort zone. You followed the map handed to you, not realizing it wasn't yours. So even when you reached milestones, something always felt missing. You smiled in the photos, but cried in the silence. You had momentum, but no meaning. Now that life is collapsing, not because you're cursed, but because your soul refuses to live in a shell any longer. The breakdown isn't your punishment. It's your rescue. This time, let the pain teach you. Not everything that hurts is meant to be escaped. Some pain isn't a problem to solve, but a path to follow. It shows you what still matters. It shows you where the wound lives. It shows you where your heart is still beating under all the layers. Carl Jung believed that the shadow, the parts of you hide, holds your most powerful healing. And the shadow doesn't show up in the light. It shows up in grief, in jealousy, in shame, in all the emotions you were taught to fear. But if you sit with it, if you allow it, it will stop being your enemy and start becoming your compass. Because the pain you're avoiding is also the path to your most authentic strength. The illusion of endless growth. You've been told you should always be improving. That stagnation is failure. That rest is laziness. But life doesn't move in a straight line. Growth is not a staircase. It's a spiral. You will revisit the same lessons. You will face the same emotions. But each time, you'll arrive with more wisdom, more clarity, more courage. You're not back where you started. You're deeper, more honest, more awake, more whole. Don't let the ego tell you that revisiting your pain is weakness. That's not failure. That's integration. That's the difference between pretending to be strong and actually becoming it. Consistency isn't about routines. It's about relationship. They told you to wake up at 5 a.m., go to the gym, read 10 pages a day. But they never told you to build a relationship with yourself. And without that, no routine will ever last. Because true consistency doesn't come from willpower. It comes from intimacy with your own needs. It comes from knowing when to push and when to pause, when to speak and when to sit in silence, when to challenge yourself and when to hold yourself gently. The problem isn't that you're inconsistent. The problem is you've been loyal to versions of yourself that never got a chance to rest. The version that was always fixing, chasing, performing. But now you're ready for a new kind of loyalty. One rooted in trust, not pressure. One that allows you to rise, not just run. Forgive the versions of you that didn't know better. There's a past version of you who only knew survival, who smiled through pain, who said yes to avoid conflict, who stayed silent to be loved, who tried again and again, hoping this time would be different. You owe that version something, not blame, but gratitude. They kept you alive. They brought you here. But now you don't need to survive. You're ready to create. So instead of judging your past, thank it. And then release it. Because you're no longer walking in circles. You're carving a new path, one that honors your inner voice more than outside applause. You don't need a new plan. You need a new pace. Your nervous system doesn't need more adrenaline. It needs safety. It needs permission to slow down, to feel again, to move at a rhythm that doesn't mimic the chaos of the world. Carl Jung said, "Hurry is not of the devil. It is the devil." And when you live in hurry, you lose touch with what matters. You skip over beauty. You ignore intuition. You numb your own warning signs. But slowing down isn't laziness. It's presence. It's the only way to reconnect with the part of you that never needed fixing, only listening. And in that quiet space, something returns. The knowing, the peace, the feeling that for the first time, you don't have to start over. You can simply begin again, but from a place you've never truly allowed yourself to stand, right where you are. They told you to keep going, to hustle harder, to act like starting over was just a mindset issue, to rise every time you fall. But what if the strength isn't in standing up quickly? What if it's in learning to fall intentionally, to collapse the versions of you that were never real, to grieve the identity that was shaped by fear, not truth, to let go of the roles that no longer fit who you're becoming? Because maybe starting over was never the real problem. Maybe the problem was that you kept starting over from the same emotional place. The lie of reinvention. You don't need to reinvent yourself. You don't need to become a brand new person every January. You don't need to burn your past to prove you've healed. You don't need to erase your history to be worthy of a future. That's not transformation. That's spiritual amnesia. Jung believed that true healing doesn't come from becoming someone new. It comes from remembering who you really are, who you were before the world told you to be palatable, productive, predictable. Real change is remembering, reconnecting, reclaiming. It's not about starting over. It's about starting from within. Rock bottom isn't the end. It's the furnace. There is a silence that only rock bottom can teach you. A silence so deep, it strips you bare. It removes the noise, the roles, the pride, and you're left with one question. Now that I've lost what I was pretending to be, who am I, really? This is the holy space Jung described when he spoke of individuation, the breaking down of the ego, the unveiling of the shadow, the surrender to what is real, raw, and unresolved. You may feel like your life is in ashes, but ashes are the birthplace of the phoenix. And before anything can rise, it must first dissolve. So let yourself dissolve, not to disappear, but to become unrecognizably whole. Your soul doesn't want perfection. It wants presence. You think you need the perfect plan, the right morning routine, the best system, the one thing that will finally fix everything. But your soul isn't asking for systems. It's asking for presence, for you to notice how your body feels when you say yes to things that kill your peace, for you to hear the sadness beneath your constant striving, for you to sit, not scroll, breathe, not perform. Presence is power, because presence is the only place where patterns are broken. When you become fully here, you stop repeating the pain of the past and stop rehearsing fears about the future. And in that stillness, you return, not as someone better, but as someone finally honest. The people you lose on this path were never yours. When you rise from your old life, some people won't recognize you. They'll call you distant. They'll say you changed. They'll try to pull you back into the versions of you that served them. Let them. Let them be confused. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to be whole within yourself. Some people only loved the mask. Some people only needed the version of you who tolerated everything quietly. But you're no longer in the business of betraying yourself to keep others comfortable. You don't need applause for your peace. You don't need a crowd to feel complete. Because the more you honor your truth, the more you attract what aligns with it. Let them go. Real connection doesn't require self-abandonment. You've been reborn more times than you know. You've shed skins that no one noticed. You've grieved in silence. You've cried in bathrooms. You've held yourself through panic, shame, regret, and still, you rise. Not because life got easier, but because you got softer. Softer with your own heart. Softer with your expectations. Softer with the idea that you must arrive to be enough. You've rebuilt without witnesses. You've grown without validation. You've forgiven people who never apologized because you needed peace more than pride. That is not weakness. That is evolution. So if today you feel tired of beginning again, tired of walking alone, tired of proving your worth, breathe. You are not lost. You are being reshaped. And the version of you that's coming, they don't need the old life to return. They're here to create a new one. The myth of final arrival. There is no final version of you. No perfect destination. No moment where everything makes sense and nothing hurts. And thank God for that. Because if life were a straight road, you'd never grow roots. Jung believed that the journey of the soul is not upward, but inward. That enlightenment isn't lightness, it's integration. The full acceptance of shadow and self, of past and present, of the parts of you that still ache and the parts of you that still dream. You don't have to wait until you're perfect to feel peace. You don't have to wait until you make it to be proud. You don't have to wait until you're whole to be worthy of love. You're allowed to rest, even as you're becoming. You're allowed to start, even if you're scared. You're allowed to exist, even if no one claps, because your becoming is sacred, whether it's seen or not. A final whisper. You never started over. Let's end with a truth you may not believe yet. You never truly started over. Every version of you still lives in your spine, your breath, your silence. Every mistake was a lesson written in your bones. Every heartbreak was a teacher cloaked in fire. Every time you collapsed was simply preparation. Preparation for the moment you'd stop running from your reflection. And finally, stand still. This is that moment. You are not beginning again. You are continuing, deeper, wiser, quieter, stronger. And the you who rises from this, they won't need to prove it. because presence doesn't need proof. It just is. And that is enough.